It all happened when I was 6 years old. I remember that day clearly because something strange happened. Something that still gives me chills when I think about it. My sister and I, along with some of our friends, went to the Burger King that had a big indoor playhouse. You know, the kind of place where there are tunnels, slides, and a ball pit. It was colorful and full of kids, and it seemed like the perfect day for fun. We were there to have a good time. My sister, some of our friends, including Jason and I, started playing right away. The playhouse had a lot of tunnels to crawl through, and we were racing to see who could get to the top first. We laughed and shouted, trying to move as fast as we could. The tunnels were tight, but they were fun to crawl through. We pushed each other, squeezed through the plastic walls, and slid down the slides. The slides were my favorite part. They were fast, and at the bottom, they led to the ball pit, a huge pit full of colorful balls. We would dive into it, feeling the soft balls sink around us. But that day, something felt different. We were all playing together, having fun, when I noticed that Jason wasn't with us anymore. At first, I didn't think much of it. It was easy to lose someone in the playhouse because there were so many tunnels and hiding spots. I thought Jason might be at the bottom in the ball pit, or maybe he had gone down one of the slides without telling us. We kept playing for a while, but after some time, my sister asked, "Where's Jason?" I stopped and looked around. "I don't know. Maybe he went down the slide," I said, trying to sound calm, but I started to feel a little nervous. Jason was always the loudest one in our group, and it was strange that we hadn't heard him. We decided to look for him. We crawled through the tunnels, peeking through the little windows on the sides. We called out his name. "Jason, Jason, where are you?" But there was no answer. The playhouse was noisy with the sounds of other kids playing and shouting, but we didn't hear Jason. We climbed up to the top where the highest slide was and looked down. From up there, you could see the whole playhouse and even the tables where the parents were sitting, eating their meals, but there was still no sign of Jason. I was starting to get worried. My sister looked at me with wide eyes. "Do you think he's okay?" "I'm sure he's fine," I said, trying to be brave, but deep down I wasn't sure anymore. Something didn't feel right. We went back down, sliding through the tunnels as fast as we could. We checked every corner of the playhouse, under the nets, behind the climbing ropes, inside every tunnel, but Jason wasn't there. That's when we heard it. At first it was faint, like a whisper. "Help! Help!" It was so quiet that I wasn't even sure if I heard it. "Did you hear that?" I asked my sister. She nodded, her face pale. It sounded like Jason. We stood still, listening. The sound came again, a little louder this time. "Help! Help!" It was Jason's voice. There was no doubt about it now. My heart started to race. "He's in trouble!" I said, and we ran through the tunnels, following the sound of his voice. The voice was coming from the lower part of the playhouse, near the ball pit. As we got closer, the voice got louder. "Help! Someone help me!" We reached the ball pit and stopped. The pit looked normal, just a sea of colorful balls, with kids jumping in and out of it, but Jason's voice was still coming from somewhere nearby. "Jason, where are you?" I shouted, looking around. There was no answer this time, just silence. I was about to say something when the balls in the pit started to move. It was slow at first, like something was under them. My sister grabbed my arm. "What's happening?" she whispered. "I don't know," I said, stepping closer. The balls were shifting, moving like something was crawling underneath them. Then suddenly, a figure shot up from the balls and I screamed. It wasn't Jason. It was a clown. A man dressed as a clown, with a dirty old costume and smeared makeup on his face. He was holding Jason, one hand wrapped tightly around him. Jason looked terrified, his eyes wide with fear. He tried to scream, but the clown had his hand over Jason's mouth. "Let him go!" I shouted, my voice shaking with fear. The clown didn't say anything. He just stared at us with cold, dark eyes. Then he started to pull Jason back into the ball pit, dragging him deeper into the sea of balls. I didn't know what to do. My sister was frozen in place, too scared to move. But I couldn't just stand there. I had to do something. I ran toward the ball pit and jumped in. The balls shifted under my feet as I waded through them, trying to reach the clown. The clown looked up, surprised, and in that moment, I pushed him as hard as I could. The clown stumbled backward, losing his balance. For a moment, he disappeared under the balls, sinking into the pit. I grabbed Jason and pulled him out as fast as I could. He was shaking, but he was okay. We ran out of the playhouse, not stopping until we were standing in front of our parents. I was out of breath and my heart was still pounding. "There's a clown in there," I shouted, pointing back at the playhouse. "He tried to take Jason." Our parents looked confused, but when they saw how scared we were, they rushed over to the playhouse. The staff went in to check, but when they got there, the clown was gone. There was no sign of him, no trace that he had ever been there. We left the Burger King soon after that. The staff said they would look into it, but nothing ever came of it. No one ever found the clown, and no one knew why he was there. To this day, I still think about that clown. I wonder who he was and what he wanted, but most of all, I'm just glad Jason was okay. When I was 5 years old, something happened to me in a McDonald's Playplace that I've never been able to forget. Even now, when I drive past the place or see kids playing in ball pits, it all comes rushing back to me. It feels like it was just yesterday, even though so much time has passed. My memory of that day is so clear. It's almost like a scene from a movie stuck in my head. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon, and my parents decided to take me and my little sister Emma out for a treat. McDonald's was our go-to place for fun, especially because of the play area. The one we went to had a big, colorful play place with tunnels, slides, and a ball pit that felt as deep as the ocean to me. As soon as we arrived, I could feel the excitement bubbling up in my chest. I couldn't wait to dive into the sea of plastic balls, swim through the colors, and race around with the other kids. After we got our food, my parents let me play. I scarfed down my Happy Meal as fast as I could, barely tasting the fries or nuggets, because I was so eager to go. The ball pit was calling me, and I wanted to be in there with my friends. Derek, one of my best friends, was there too. His parents had brought him, and we had planned this whole day together. "Can I go play now, Mom?" I asked, already halfway out of my seat. She smiled and nodded, reminding me, "Stay where we can see you, okay?" I barely heard her as I took off toward the play place. The minute my feet hit the soft, bouncy mat that covered the ground around the play area, I felt like I was in another world. The brightly colored tunnels, the huge slides, and of course, the ball pit, they were all waiting for me. I could hear the laughter of the other kids, the squeaky sounds of their shoes against the plastic floors, and the rustling of the balls as kids jumped and swam through them. It was the happiest place I could imagine. Derek ran up to me, already out of breath from playing. "Come on, let's go to the ball pit," he said, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward it. We were both smiling and giggling, ready for the adventure. The ball pit was huge to me at that age, a mountain of bright, multicolored plastic balls that stretched out in all directions. You could jump into it and disappear beneath the surface, and it felt like you were swimming in a sea of colors. Without a second thought, I jumped in. The balls flew up around me as I sank down into the pit, the familiar soft plastic surrounding me. I popped back up, laughing. Derek followed right behind me, and soon we were both lost in the fun, throwing balls at each other and diving underneath them. For a few minutes, everything was perfect. We played hide and seek in the pit, trying to disappear under the balls and sneak up on each other. Derek was always better at hiding than I was, but I didn't mind. I was having too much fun to care about winning. Then something happened that changed everything. I had just jumped into the balls again when I felt that something grabbed my ankle. At first I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was just one of the other kids in the pit. I tugged my leg, trying to pull free, but the grip tightened. "Let go, Derek," I said, laughing, because I thought it was him. I turned around, expecting to see Derek there, messing with me like he always did. But when I looked up, I saw him sitting at the top of one of the slides, smiling and waving down at me. He wasn't anywhere near the ball pit. My heart skipped a beat. If Derek wasn't the one holding my ankle, then who was, or what was? I felt the grip tighten even more. And now it wasn't playful, it wasn't a joke. It was strong, pulling me downward, deeper into the ball pit. Panic hit me like a wave. I tried to pull my leg free, but whatever it was wouldn't let go. My hands flew through the plastic balls, pushing them aside as I struggled to stand up. But the harder I tried to pull away, the stronger the grip became. My breath quickened and my heart was racing in my chest. The laughter and noise of the other kids around me faded as fear took over. "Derek, help!" I called out, but he didn't hear me. He was too busy sliding down, not noticing what was happening to me. I looked around, hoping one of the other kids would see me struggling, but everyone seemed so far away. It felt like I was all alone in that ball pit, trapped by something I couldn't even see. Then I did the only thing I could think of. I reached down, grabbing at whatever had my ankle. My fingers brushed against something cold and smooth, a hand. A hand was pulling me down. My stomach dropped as I realized it wasn't another kid. It didn't feel like a kid's hand. It was too big, too strong, and it was dragging me deeper into the balls. In a burst of fear, I yanked my leg as hard as I could, pulling against the hand. For a moment, it felt like it wouldn't let go, like it was going to pull me down under the balls where no one could see me. But then, all at once, the grip loosened, and I was free. I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding in my chest, and climbed out of the ball pit as fast as I could. My legs were shaking, and my mind was racing with 100 different thoughts. I looked around, half expecting to see someone else crawling out of the pit behind me. Maybe one of the staff members or an older kid, but there was no one there. The ball pit was just as it had been before, bright, colorful, and full of plastic balls. No one was hiding in it. No one else was even near it. My breath came in shaky gasps as I ran toward my parents, who were sitting at a table on the other side of the play area. "Mom, Dad," I called out, my voice trembling. "Something grabbed me in the ball pit." My mom looked up from her phone, her face turning serious when she saw how scared I was. "What do you mean, honey?" she asked, standing up and walking over to me. "There was a hand," I said, my voice rising in panic. "It grabbed my leg and I couldn't get away." My dad frowned and exchanged a look with my mom before turning toward the ball pit. "Are you sure?" he asked. Maybe it was just one of the other kids playing around. "No," I insisted, shaking my head. "It wasn't a kid. It was something else." At that moment, Derek came running up to us, completely oblivious to what had just happened. "Are you okay?" he asked, looking at me with concern. "You ran out of the ball pit so fast." I didn't know how to explain it. I didn't know what had happened, but I knew that something had grabbed me, something that wasn't supposed to be there. My dad decided to talk to one of the staff members. A young guy in a McDonald's uniform came over and listened as I explained what had happened. He nodded, looking serious, and told me he'd check the ball pit. He called another employee over, and together they walked toward the play area. I watched from a distance, still shaken by what had happened. My parents stood next to me, their arms around me as we waited. The staff members walked around the play area, checking the tunnels and slides before finally getting to the ball pit. One of them climbed in, wading through the balls as if searching for something. But they didn't find anything. "There's nothing here," the staff member said, climbing back out of the pit. "No one's hiding in there." I stared at the ball pit, my mind racing. How could that be? I knew what I had felt. I knew something had grabbed me. But now, standing there with my parents and Derek, it all seemed so normal. Just a regular ball pit in a McDonald's Playplace. "Maybe you just imagined it," my mom said gently, brushing a hand over my hair. "Sometimes our minds play tricks on us, especially when we're scared." But I knew it wasn't my imagination. I had felt that hand, cold and strong, pulling me down into the pit, and the way it had let go all at once still gave me chills. The rest of the day went by in a blur. I didn't go back into the Playplace, and neither did Derek. We stayed near our parents, eating ice cream and talking about other things, but in the back of my mind, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Even now, years later, I still think about it sometimes. I don't know what grabbed me in that ball pit, and maybe I never will. But I do know one thing: I'll never forget that day, no matter how hard I try. Something was in there with me. Something that shouldn't have been. And to this day, I hope I never find out what it was. When I was in high school in 11th grade, something happened that I still think about sometimes, especially late at night. It was the kind of thing that sounded like fun at first, something my friend Jake convinced me to do. But by the end of it, I knew I would never look at abandoned places the same way again. It all started one night, around 3 a.m. I was lying in bed, unable to sleep, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Jake. "Want to go to the old Burger King? The abandoned one?" At first, I didn't even think about answering. It was so late, and the idea of sneaking into some abandoned place in the middle of the night seemed stupid. But then again, Jake always had these kinds of crazy ideas, and nothing bad had ever come from them before. Plus, I was bored, and there was nothing else to do. I texted him back. "You serious? It's 3 a.m. Jake replied almost instantly. "Exactly, no one will be around. We can check out the Playplace, post about it on Snapchat, and see if it's as creepy as people say." I thought about it for a second. The old Burger King on Maple Avenue had been shut down for as long as I could remember. My older brother used to tell me stories about why it closed. Some said it was haunted, others said it just went out of business, but no one really knew for sure. All I knew is that it had been sitting there, abandoned, for about 20 years. "Fine," I finally texted back. "I'll meet you in 10 minutes. I pulled on my hoodie and sneakers, slipped out of my house as quietly as I could, and walked down the empty street to meet Jake. The air was cool and the town was silent. It felt like we were the only ones awake. Jake was already waiting by the corner on his bike when I got there. "You ready for this?" he asked, grinning like a kid who had just found a treasure map. I nodded, even though I wasn't entirely sure if I was ready or not. "Let's just get it over with," I said. We hopped on our bikes and rode toward the old Burger King. The streets were completely empty, not a single car in sight. The only sound was the quiet hum of our bike tires on the pavement. After about 10 minutes, we reached the place. The old Burger King looked even creepier at night. The building was dark and covered in grime, its windows cracked and dirty. The big sign out front had long since faded, and weeds grew through the cracks in the parking lot. But there, standing tall in the back, was the Playplace. It looked just as old and forgotten as the rest of the place, with its rusty slides and tunnels covered in dust. "There it is," Jake said, pointing at the Playplace. I swallowed hard. "You really want to go in there?" "Of course," Jake said, already moving toward the fence. "Come on, it'll be fun." We climbed over the rusty chain-link fence and landed in what used to be the outdoor play area. The ground was cracked and the swings had long since disappeared, but the tunnels and slides were still standing. They looked old and worn out, but somehow, they hadn't fallen apart yet. "And see, it's like a time capsule," Jake said as he walked towards the entrance to the play place. "Or a death trap," I muttered under my breath, following behind him. The door to the tunnel that led into the play area creaked loudly as Jake pushed it open. Inside, the plastic walls were dirty, and spider webs covered every corner. The place smelled like old rubber and mold. We both turned on our phone flashlights, casting eerie beams of light through the narrow tunnels. "You go that way, and I'll go this way," Jake said, pointing down 2 different tunnels. "We'll meet up in the middle." I wasn't a fan of the idea of splitting up in a place like this, but Jake was already crawling into his tunnel before I could say anything. So I went down the opposite tunnel, my flashlight bouncing off the walls as I crawled through. The further I went, the stranger the place felt. It was quiet except for the soft sound of my breathing and the faint rustling of the wind outside. As I crawled through one of the tunnels, something caught my eye. A spider web, still fresh and glistening in the beam of my flashlight. It was strange to see something so fresh in a place so old. "Hey, Jake," I called out, still staring at the web. "Come check this out." There was no answer. I called again, louder this time. "Jake!" Still nothing. That was when I started to feel uneasy. Jake was always quick to respond, especially when I found something interesting. I called his name again, but there was no reply. My heart started to race a little. I didn't want to panic, but something felt off. I quickly crawled back through the tunnel trying to find Jake. When I reached the main play area, he was nowhere to be seen. "Jake!" I shouted, my voice echoing through the empty tunnels. Then I heard it, a soft sound like someone choking. My heart leaped into my throat. I ran toward the sound, my flashlight trembling in my hand. I turned a corner, and there he was. Jake was on the ground, clutching at his throat like he was trying to pull something off him, but there was nothing there. "Jake, what's happening?" I yelled, running toward him. He didn't answer, just kept struggling, gasping for air as if something invisible was choking him. I dropped to my knees beside him, frantically trying to help. I grabbed his hands, trying to pull them away from his neck, but it was like he couldn't stop. His face was turning red, and his eyes were wide with terror. I didn't know what to do. There was nothing around him, nothing that could be choking him, but he was suffocating right in front of me. I grabbed his shoulders and shook him hard, yelling his name over and over again. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. Jake gasped, sucking in a deep breath and collapsing onto the ground. He lay there, breathing heavily, his face pale and sweaty. "Jake, are you okay?" I asked, my voice shaking. He nodded weakly, still trying to catch his breath. I don't know what happened," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "It felt like something was choking me, but there was nothing there." We both sat there in silence for a moment, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I couldn't explain it. There was no one else in the Playplace, and nothing had touched him. But something had definitely happened. Something we couldn't see. "We need to get out of here," I finally said, helping Jake to his feet. He nodded, still looking shaken. "Yeah, let's go." We didn't say much as we crawled back through the tunnels, moving as quickly as we could. The Playplace, which had seemed like a fun adventure just an hour ago, now felt like a nightmare. Every sound, every shadow made me jump. I just wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. When we finally made it back to the entrance, we both scrambled through the door and jumped over the fence. Our bikes were still there, leaning against the fence where we had left them. We hopped on and pedaled as fast as we could, not stopping until we were far away from the old Burger King. By the time we reached Jake's house, we were both out of breath, but neither of us spoke. We just sat on the curb, staring at the ground, trying to process what had happened. What do you think that was?" I finally asked, breaking the silence. Jake shook his head. "I don't know, man. I really don't know." We never talked about it after that night, and we never went back to the abandoned Burger King. Whatever had happened in that Playplace, we didn't want to know more. All I know is that something strange, something I can't explain, choked my friend that night. And since then, I've promised myself one thing: I'll never explore an abandoned place again.